Sounds good. And we can go to the next slide. Yes, this is just the welcoming part. It's really a pleasure to be here. I welcome opportunities, especially now. I find them particularly powerful to be able to talk about this work, which has become front and center in these very challenging times in which we all live. My mom asked me at the end of last week, or actually she sent me one of those mom texts. So even at my age, moms worry, right? She said, honey, you know, you're looking so stressed. Is everything okay? And I had just had the most amazing experience where one of my staff members who works on all of our undocumented initiatives had created a system-wide experience for all our undocumented students to hear me, Mary Jo Gonzalez, who's our VP of Student Affairs, as well as the people on the team who are there for our undocumented students, and then acknowledge the point people throughout the system, and then had an amazing keynote. What was really moving about that was the way in which I could feel this web of support that had been created with the students, for the students. And I feel like that's what we're doing now with our faculty and staff. We're building on foundations that have been here. People have been working on the work of equity, inclusion, social justice for a long time. Back in the day, 30 years ago, when I was a student here, there was some going on. I'm a bit of a different person than I was in those days. I've only been back a couple of years, but it's been amazing. So I am the Associate Vice President in Student Affairs, and my area is community, equity, and social justice. So I'm just going to be sharing with you a sort of overview of the work that we do, some of which is focused on our students specifically, but it has implications for all of us, as well as I'll be sharing some initiatives that are specifically for faculty and staff. So again, I'm really glad you're here. This has been my work for 30 years. I've been engaged in this work in higher ed. It's quite a moment to have come full circle. But I'm very pleased with the spirit of willingness and commitment and passion that so many of our colleagues have right now. All right, next slide. So here's a few things we'll be going over. My team has been working on introducing universal design expectations within our pillar, the community, equity, and social justice pillar in terms of social media. We'll talk about that. One of the results of the 5 working groups that some of you may be familiar with after our student protests in 2017 in the fall, the 5 working groups on campus culture and climate were created by President Schultz and Mary Jo Gonzalez. And one of those groups focused on recruitment and retention of faculty and staff from underrepresented communities. And one of the results was this resource guide. I'll be sharing more of that with you. Also, you may recall there was some legislation that affirmed that we really do actually by law have to take into account our students' religious affiliations with regard to access to their being able to test and so on if there is in fact a religious holiday that impacts them. So we have an interfaith group that is from across the system, from across various divisions, have created or added to the interfaith calendar. I want to talk with you about our fall diversity and equity summit, equity in higher ed during the time of COVID, and then some other initiatives. And then we'll talk really briefly about what we're doing to support our students during this upcoming election, which with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think we're getting signs that it could get even more intense if that's possible. So that gives you kind of an overview of what we'll be going through in this next while. Oops, thank you. So in terms of universal design, my group wanted to, you may know or you may not, that the Access Center is under my area. So that's the group that provides accommodations for students and at times works with HR for faculty and staff as well. We decided that as a group that we really needed to, it behooved us to start these discussions about universal design, which is not quite the same as what the ADA requires of us as far as the Americans with Disabilities Act and our responsibilities. For me, this takes the core of inclusion to the next level. So we thought we would focus on our social media, and we worked with people from the Access Center and others to come up with this work. So alternative text for images, videos having closed captioning. In Facebook, alternative text for images, Twitter, the same, with videos having closed captioning. In terms of presentations that we all do, videos should have closed captioning, and images should be described. And handouts, we're also looking at what how our handouts can be more universally designed. We have this information available, and what we hope to do is partner with HR, for example, and other departments across our WSU system to get this information into everybody's hands. And we felt like this is a beginning point. One of the positives in this powerful moment, this confluence of so many things, we have the pandemic, which has laid all of our inequities bare and reminds us that these inequities have existed actually for centuries if we really think about it. So we have that going on. We also have had a tipping point, I would say, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and frankly, sadly and horrifically, countless other Black people and brown people. So with those, I feel that we have all been called in a much more clear and concrete way that we have an opportunity to get some things right. So we're going to keep working around around universal design, helping to get out the philosophical framework. It's not just about ramps and physical access to buildings. It's much, much more than that. And there are things we can do really easily. So there'll be more on that as we continue to learn and develop the tools. I'm going to kind of go through these things. If you would write down questions rather than stop after each one, I think that will help us. I think the discussion and questions for me is always the juiciest part anyway. So next slide. So events are also part of that. We've learned a few things in terms of, for example, it used to be you go into an event, maybe in the senior ballroom, and there would be the one space right at a table where a wheelchair could go in. And so people were forced to choose. If you happen to get around that way, you're forced to choose the only space there. So we're getting much better at having multiple spaces around, maybe one at each table, so that people who get around that way will feel like I have choices in terms of where I can sit and watch. And absolutely, in terms of our advertising, as already mentioned, I think a lot of what we shared previously, but I think the statement that we're utilizing, we want everyone to feel like they're affirmed and can fully engage in our event. Please let us know if there's anything we should be aware of as we plan. So we're getting this out ahead of time so that we can very genuinely and earnestly be responsive in that way. And I already just mentioned in terms of setting up space so that people know they have options. Like somebody is going to be reading the closed captioning. Maybe they want to sit up more closely, those kinds of things. And of course, always having an ASL interpreter, very important. Next slide. Oh, I see that Jason has organized this differently. Can I get a thumbs up or down? Is it all right with you if we go through things, and as long as you're noting questions you have? I see a thumbs up on this screen. Yes, 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 cool. All right, so then we'll go to the next slide. So our resource guide, as I said, was a result of the 5 working groups. And as we work to develop a number of efforts and strategies to do better in our searches with regard to ensuring a diverse pool of candidates. And when I use the term diversity, I mean it in all of its complexity. Of course, racial and ethnic diversity will continue to be pretty salient for us as we look to increasing numbers of representation of underrepresented people. We also understand that there's a complexity in terms of points of view, scholarship, any number of things that would be part of that. So one of our tools now is being able to we will have some physical copies, of course, but we'll also be able to direct people to our resource guide. So what we did is we listed, part 1 is listing system-wide resources. Section 2 is resources for specific underrepresented groups. And then section 3 is general cultural resources and events. This is a living, breathing document. We don't have the be-all, end-all on resources. We learn a lot from our community. What a great idea to ask our communities what they need instead of assuming. So we did reach out to a lot of different people representing underrepresented people, often across the system, to get their feedback and show them what we had been working on. And in order to ensure that we were getting the information that people were actually looking for. The one right now that's up, Pullman, is Pullman because we provided this template for every campus so that we have the connecting threads of what our system offers, but each campus is going to need to fill in the rest, because obviously those of us who are based in Pullman, it wouldn't be fair. We'd be doing a disservice to the whole intention of what this tool is. Our ultimate goal is that there will be somebody called an equity advisor that will meet with on-campus interviewees and be able to be asked any questions about our campus, our community, that you can't often get when you are in the interview process, because we cannot ask personal questions. But moving your family or yourself to a new community is personal, and there's lots of different information people need. So being able to have someone who's not on the search committee or in the department be able to offer up this tool and answer some of those questions is an invaluable recruitment tool, because right away you're sending the message that you matter, we want you, and we can do the both and of, being pretty honest about the challenges, and here's our resources. And again, and if you choose to go out and look at the guide and you see something, please, there's a way to email us information so that we can add that, or if there's something that you find to be problematic. We are imperfect humans doing the best we can, and we approach this with a lot of humility. So we're open to the suggestions. Next slide. This actually also segues into that. We now have a very robust calendar of religious holidays and observances that we know are important, not only to our students, but our faculty and staff. So this is actually based on the Provost website. You can see at the bottom of the slide that's where it lives. In addition to this, we had an interfaith working group, as I was referring to a moment ago, that was working on developing this calendar, as well as how do we create spaces for students to be able to engage in discussions and questions around faith in such a way that, again, it's more about engaging in that way. We're not promoting any particular religion. That would be completely wrong, given a lot of things. So this group is going to continue as the Interfaith Council. And that way we will continue to work on initiatives and efforts that can be helpful to that end. So next slide. I mentioned this summit, I think a little bit ago, that our DEI summits happen, one in the fall and one in the spring. I'm sure some of you have actually attended them. We thought it was an amazing opportunity, and it would be silly to not do what we plan to do, which is equity in higher education during the time of COVID. And what we've asked, we've reached out to each campus to provide something. But we're not asking for a listing of here's what we're doing. We're doing this, this, this. We want to know how the pandemic is transforming how you're doing things and what that means for the issues of equity, as we acknowledge that, yes, all of our inequities are laid bare right now. And we have so many different things going on that have been impacting that. We know, for example, that there's a direct relationship to our lower enrollment numbers for African American men across the country. And it has to do with what's happening to people's livelihoods, the ways in which communities of color have been more directly impacted by the disease, health disparities, et cetera. So we're going to have some opening remarks. President Schultz will be providing those. We're going to include student stories, a montage of student stories of how the pandemic has impacted them. And then we'll have presenters from across the campus. And then after that, we're going to have Provost Chilton and Vice President Gonzalez respond to what they heard. And then we'll have time for some Q&A. These have been really successful and growing. It's an opportunity for us to learn from one another, to know what's going on all of our different campuses, and to see that this work is, in fact, work in which we are all stakeholders. We may have different roles, but in order to create meaningful, long-lasting change, we recognize that we must work with others to ensure that happening. Next slide. So these are a few other things that we have going on. I love this, my assistant, Jason Abrams, who some of you may know, who's amazing. I just love the image he found for this. It's really cool. So right now we have a wonderful speaker series going on disability and intersectionality. So we see things, we see race and disability and gender and other issues being discussed and articulated through the speakers we're having who embody those identities. And we, at our first session, 300 people had signed up and 200 and something actually came. And what we're seeing, which is, I think, again, one of the positives in our current environment, we have more people showing up to things who, because they don't have to drive back to campus and all the other things that can be viewed as barriers, obstacles aren't there. So we're having a participation rates that I'm seeing so far, and this is just anecdotal, don't quote me on it, but we're seeing an increase in participation rates, and we're hoping that continues, because that would be really well worth continuing to discuss as we move eventually past the pandemic and are doing more things in person. We're learning a lot about true access. We also have under our undocumented initiatives, we have a partnership with the University of Idaho. So we have an immigration law clinic. And this year, because again, of where we're at, we're able to offer it system-wide. And this isn't just for our undocumented students. We have international students who have questions around immigration. And they will be able to access that, and it's a free service. They're all senior law students working with the director of the law clinic, who's a wonderful partner. They have a new person this year. He also attended our undocumented initiatives welcome on Friday. But I'm just so impressed and pleased by how the team has been able to develop this partnership and made a really meaningful service available to our students. In the Women's Center, they're starting a new program, excuse me, called Fem Scouts, and it's based on a lot of what those of us who may have been part of Girl Scouts, Campfire Girls, whatever. So students work through a process where they earn badges around service and community, and also have opportunities to create programming. And that's looking particularly promising. Later this fall, actually not that much later, I can't believe we're actually moving past the midpoint of September into October. In October, we will be launching our Community and Equity Certificate Program for faculty and staff. This, like our equity series, is done in partnership with HRS. We're using the platform utilized by HRS to both allow people to sign up, as well as a way to monitor how many people are engaging with that. I can tell you that our equity series, Equity 101, 102, 103, have been well received. The president participated in 101. It's a 3-hour session. The team, the collective that created this series, also system-wide representation. So it wasn't just Pullman developing it and saying, hey, you can participate. We were developing the curricula with partners across the system. Our 101, our equity series is booked full through the fall, which is wonderful problem to have. We are actually we've started Train the Trainer so that we will have more trainers available, which will build, of course, on our capacity. We're excited for that. So in order to get the certificate, you must take the 101 series. You don't have to, you can take 101 and then take some other, you can engage with other options to build on that. But you must take 101, 102, and 103 in order. We're offering a variety of other workshops, seminars, etc. Again, from trainers across our system. They'll all be listed. They could include things like how to work with undocumented students, allyship for our LGBTQ community, implicit bias for our searches, implicit bias awareness around searches, and many, many other opportunities. So it'll be awesome when we're launching that. And I think it's going to be, as our Equity Series partnership with HR was wonderful, I think this will also be quite something. Lastly, the defamation experience. The defamation experience is actually a play, and it's a play about a defamation case that ends up touching on all sorts of issues around race, equity, social justice. And at the end of the play, the judge turns to the audience and says, well, now you're the jury. And then they deliberate, and then there's discussions about why you chose the plaintiff or not. And we did this at the University of New Hampshire, and it was very well received. We're working in partnership with some of our academic departments, criminal justice, for example, as well as the U of I law schools. But it's really for anybody and everybody. And now it's being done virtually, and they're really good at working with big groups, setting up discussion rooms. 2 weeks later, there's another session, so you can follow up, because there's no way that we ever would finish, all the kinds of thoughts that end up churning from such an experience. So we will, and I'm amazed at how well they do this virtually. You really feel like you're part of this. I think this will be a wonderful experience, and it's going to be offered for our entire community. So that is kind of the overview of a variety of things. And I am happy to, oh, I missed one. Thank you, Dawn. Oh my goodness, this is so important. We all have been worrying about, or concerned about, I should say, about this election, as we all experienced the last one, and wanting to be as prepared as possible for what might occur, and to get tools into our students' hands to make sure we're having robust discussions. So Community Equity and Social Justice offered to partner with our CCE pillar, Center for Civic Engagement, who are conducting a number of public squares. So for example, they already did the food insecurity during a pandemic. Tomorrow is, I think it's tomorrow or Thursday. What is environmental justice and why should you care about it? Coming off of those, I don't know, it felt like 10 days. I'm sure it wasn't that long, but it felt like it, of not being able to go outside or breathe, I think was something that was hard on every single one of us, especially right now when some of the only joy we have is getting outside. They're going to be doing one on voter suppression. And then also, when we think about people who maybe can't vote, some of our international students and documented students, we're also going to talk about ways to engage in the democratic process if you can't vote, how you can also still be part of getting out the vote and influencing voting. We're about to launch our First Amendment in Higher Ed website, which articulates clearly what the First Amendment is, does, etc., but also what we can do as a community when sometimes we feel like those things are at odds with one another. We are operating on the belief that it is not an all or nothing proposition, that we can both be supporting a caring, inclusive, equitable community, while at the same time support the First Amendment. So we're looking on more meaningful and robust ways to engage with that, so that our students, sometimes who are most harmed by some of the protected speech incidents that take place, how can we convey our community values in such a way that our students make other choices rather than, it's not about us saying you can't do that, but why would you want to do that if we're really part of this caring Coug community? So more on that as it develops. It's another obviously work in progress. So we'll go to the next slide, and I'm pretty sure I have covered everything.
You have covered everything. That was it.
Awesome. So I am, as I said, I'm very happy to answer questions, engage in discussion, whatever would be helpful.
And folks, if you do have questions for Jaime, I appreciate you unmuting, but please keep your video muted due to the recording. Thank you.
Can we, maybe if we stop sharing the screen, then we can see too if anyone is.
Sure.
So you can also put your question, if you put an X by your name or even your question, we can answer it. Or even feedback. If you have feedback, I'm open to that too. Did I hear someone? I heard a breath, like someone was going to say something. Horace Young has a question.
Yes, it's actually a two-part question because you mentioned earlier the types of encouragement to faculty that we would have to adopt what I call three-dimensional methods of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of just faculty lecture, student recipient, and,
Yep.
and other means of stimulus, which right now we're doing through technology and a variety of other things. One of the adjustments that I think was difficult for many faculty members was having to learn to do this on the fly. Mm-hmm. And when the training was offered as an option, a lot of people did not participate because they didn't think they were going to have to do it.
Yeah.
Is that going to be a point where training becomes mandatory so that we can all reach a minimum standard of the use of technology in these initiatives?
That is a great question. So yes, there are. I have also two parts to my answer on that. We are developing with the team that's, it's led up by Mary Anita Nesbitt, who is kind of the director of our faculty staff initiatives. And we've been talking a lot about how we could be involved with offering how to create an equitable experience in the online environment. So there are those things being developed. I know too that there are a couple of other initiatives that aren't a partnership between a faculty member and one of my staff in doing a faculty academy that would include some of the things you are also talking about. Mandatory, that, you know, as you noted, all of us needed that training, right? If we were going to be providing any kind of, whether it was teaching, whether it's a presentation like this, we all need to know how to better utilize the technology to be as impactful as possible and as equitable as possible. I have found, and I'm going to talk for a minute about the implicit bias awareness training that I did last year, and then our equity series. So to date, I think by the end of the fall semester, we'll be well over 1,000 faculty and staff participating in the equity series. Last year I provided the trainings on implicit bias awareness around searches and so on. And it was just me because things happened where it was announced and I wasn't part of the discussion and leapt in to do it. And also more than 800, I think I'm close to 900 people now, faculty and staff who have done that. Right now we're being inundated with requests and desire, and there's a lot of willingness. I'm not foreseeing, at least in the near future, mandating it, although I think that the point you're raising is something that would have to come out of like academic affairs. If the provost, deans, and department heads, you know, said, look, we're going through this, and I'm sorry, I got distracted by a question. Anyway, we'll be going through that process, and I think I know that when I've worked with academic affairs leaders in that environment, if your chair or your department head or dean says, look, I have an expectation, that they do it. And most people, once they're engaged, benefit, just like your example of how do you teach a course, right, in this environment. I don't know if that answers your question in a satisfactory way, but I'd be also happy to talk with you all offline on making some of those connections and figure out how we could utilize what we're doing already in a strategic way to get at that, that concern, which is important.
It does address it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Naomi Bender was just asking what's the process of who will speak for the DEI Summit. I reach out to leadership and ask. So I'm assuming Naomi might be asking specifically about the medical college and Spokane campus. And I've been talking I did talk with Daryl, who's the chancellor, as well as David Garcia, who does a lot of the equity work for the medical college. So I will send Naomi an email and let her know, and maybe we can talk about something she might be interested in. Let's see. Good question. This Taylor Ellsworth is asking how are our students staying involved with our multicultural student services and other resources on campus? The short answer is yes. They're part of my team, and we have, well, when COVID first hit us and we all got sent home, we were meeting every morning just to check in and start responding to that very question. Now we meet twice a week as a leadership team, and I've extended the leadership team. And then I also have an executive team, which are all the directors. So we've been working very diligently on how to ensure that we're reaching our students, making those connections, and that they know they have somebody who's looking out for them. We're looking at how we're going through a reorg of sorts right now. So for example, MSS was the umbrella for all the racial and ethnic student resource centers. But I also have under my pillar the Access Center, the Women's Center, the GSORC, which is our LGBTQ center, and then our Outreach and Education, which was in the past, that was Jeff Guillory's area, some of you may know. So they did a lot of the training across the campuses, but also did some work across the state. One of our leads, as I said, Mary Anita Nesbitt, had experience working with Extension. So all the connections people bring with them have that impact. So what we've done right now is we have one umbrella pillars: student, community, equity, and social justice. Steve Bischoff is the lead, the director under now all of the racial and ethnic centers. Matthew Jeffries has the Women's Center, the LGBTQ, GSORC, the Access Center, and Undocumented Initiatives. Alan Sutton, who is new to us, he's been with us about a year. He is in charge of outreach and education. We've also pulled that apart since Matthew Jeffries also does work with faculty and staff. Mary Anita is part of that focus on faculty staff. Alan Sutton and his team are doing student outreach and education. So we have a lot of the experiences I was articulating, or initiatives, get at that. We're looking to bring Trevor Noah for our Common Read to do a virtual event. We're trying to raise the money for that. We thought it'd be a lot cheaper, but it's still pretty expensive. But that's another meaningful opportunity that we think will really engage students. And of course, the Common Read does an excellent job with all their supportive points. I see another question around search committees. Yeah, the question is, how do we ensure that we have diverse representation on search committees? And I think a lot of the work we're doing that people are engaging with, we talk about that in the equity series. We have another, it wasn't included in this presentation, but in this, sometime in October, we're bringing in somebody who's going to talk about how to supervise, or supervising people from underrepresented communities, how to be an effective supervisor. I think that could be a very well attended session for all of us. And part of that is discussing how we conduct searches. I cover that some in my, when I do implicit bias awareness. Before I even get into that, I talk about how important it is to pull together the search committee, which should be diverse. However, there's a caveat to that because of what you said. We tend to have the same person and keep going to the same people who are already probably taxed because they may be the only in their department. Students are clamoring for them, as well as, oh, you can be on, oh my God, so many committees, yay. And we end up, actually that kind of falls against what we hope to do in our retention of people, right, from diverse communities. So part of it is if we can really help expand capacity around what it means to conduct an equitable search, that and that people are addressing bias before they even look at the position description, in some way we get at that. I think that also our new provost, she's really proving to be, I think, a champion of the work of equity, and I think this will be a really good time, especially as they're in the process of hiring a associate vice provost who will be specifically working on inclusive excellence, which is very much connected to conducting equitable searches. I'm going to share, I'm going to be meeting with Elizabeth, and I think that's another opportunity to share that concern and say, because obviously this is an ongoing concern. So I think that could be something, just we need to be reminded and kind of push on that whenever we can. So multiple layers of trying to shift that to eventually impact our campus climate and culture. So any other question? I don't know how, I knew how long, is this an hour, 45 minutes?
We originally scheduled for 30 minutes, Jamie, but if we can go a full hour if there are other questions.
I will leave that up to this amazing group. There's it's quite something to see how many people showed up, actually. So if there is any other question, happy to entertain it. You can email me at jennifer.nolan. I know it's my given name, so Jamie's my nickname, but if you want to reach me, please feel free to email. And it looks like, thank you for the thank yous. That always feels nice. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.